Chronic, unrelenting stress is a global phenomenon now. It's being experienced to some degree or another by most people all around the world. So having a strategy to minimize this kind of nervous overwhelm is really, really important. But often, it can be very difficult. We can be so deeply entrenched into mental hyperactivity and repetitive cyclic thinking that it can feel impossible just to even come up for air. Sometimes we need a little bit of support in doing that. And obviously there's loads of stuff that we can do that can offer us that support, but from a herbal perspective, inviting a herb like passion flower into our lives can make the world of difference, because passion flower is a relaxing nervine. So it's very soothing and calming and nourishing to the central nervous system, and it doesn't really suppress a lot of neurological activity like pharmaceutical sedatives would. And that's what's so cool about passion flower, because it's one of the best herbal sedatives, and it doesn't have any of those common side effects that you'll experience when you're taking things like pharmaceutical antidepressants or monoamine oxidase inhibitors or MAOIs. And, it's very, very safe. It's perfectly safe for children to take, especially children that are very hyperactive, children that have a lot of tension in them, a lot of repetitive behavior. Those kind of children, especially them, this is really good for them. Passion flower is anti-spasmodic, so it has a very calming effect on muscle fibers. So it can reduce a lot of the physical tension that is associated with stress. And it's also an anxiolytic medicine, which basically means that it has a very specific effect in treating anxiety. And it's also frequently used for drug addicts or people that are trying to come off addictive substances, because it's very, very good at decreasing withdrawal symptoms for people that have some form of chemical dependency. Now, in a clinical setting, passion flower is frequently used to treat people that are prone to overthinking and obsessive worrying and this type of thing, because it's very, very good at reducing the mental tension that propagates this kind of repetitive behavior. But this is really interesting, because when we look at this from an Eastern perspective, we can see that passion flower is actually very good at reducing an excess of the wind element internally as it relates to the mind. Now, the wind element really symbolizes movement, which is obviously very important. We want our body to move, we want things to be moving around inside of us in order to exist. It's also the movement of our mind, which is very important, to have thought processes and feelings and actually be able to process all of that requires some degree of movement, and the wind energy really represents this form of movement. But when we have too much of it, that wind, just like in external nature, that wind can become a bit too strong. And when we see very strong winds in a storm, they become very destructive. They break things down. They can destroy people's homes. They can rip trees out of the ground. Strong winds can cause a lot of damage. So when we're looking at this from an Eastern medicine perspective, the wind element internally as it relates to the mind, when it's in excess, it can become very, very destructive. Also, we see very strong winds in nature. A lot of the time, tornadoes would be a good example. They have this tendency to spin around and around and around in a cyclical movement. The wind energy internally is no different once it's in excess. In Ayurvedic medicine, the wind element is referred to as vata. And when we have an excess of mental vata, the way in which it's experienced is that people find it very, very difficult to shut off the mind. Another way of looking at this would be that this excess of mental wind overstimulates us, and it results in the channels or the meridians that this wind energy travels through. These channels begin to constrict, and often they can become blocked. So the wind cannot pass through them unobstructed. So when it's blocked like this, it can't move freely, and it tends to have this very repetitive cyclic motion. And obviously this can become very destructive, and it results in the experience of our mind behaving in the same way, you know, having this repetitive cyclic nature, which is of course very stressful. So things are just going around and around and around again. So passion flower is actually very good at pacifying this mental wind, and it's actually helping the channels to open up and to dilate and allow this accumulated trapped wind to be released. The alkaloids in passion flower make it a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which basically means that it helps to keep feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin active within the brain for longer, helping us to feel a lot more content and obviously a lot less sensitive to stress. So it operates from a couple of important directions. Firstly, it's calming the resulting symptoms of stress and anxious behavior while elevating mood and reducing our susceptibility to stress in the first place. In fact, the alkaloids and the flavonoids in passion flower are largely believed to be responsible for its many health benefits. Although, you know, I would strongly discourage this type of thinking because it drastically oversimplifies how a herb works, and it really just reduces it to a couple of active constituents that, in truth, are completely dependent on innumerable micronutrients that really haven't been studied anywhere near enough. Passion flower also stimulates the production of GABA, which is another very important neurotransmitter, kind of a bit similar to serotonin, and it's very good at regulating brain function and regulating mood because it basically helps to slow everything down when things are getting a bit too tense, a bit too overstimulated within the mind. GABA can very much pacify that kind of activity. So what we often find when we're going through periods of chronic stress is we start to burn up our ability to produce some of these neurotransmitters, and we're actually burning up some of the receptor sites that these neurotransmitters need to reach in order to be active and have their effect. So, you know, supporting the central nervous system and supporting production of substances like GABA is really an important part of an overall strategy. The increase in GABA is believed to be why passion flower is so good at treating insomnia and helping people to just let go and drift off to sleep nice and easily. But again, you know, in reality, this is going to be the fruit of many associated factors, and it's not going to just all boil down to this one thing, which I think, as a side note, is why we shouldn't really take things like isolated GABA supplements, because this is really not worthwhile. It's just a waste of money. It's not going to have the effect that we're expecting it to have, because an isolated GABA supplement on its own is not really able to cross the blood-brain barrier, and so it's really just going to be quite useless. But in the case of passion flower, we see that passion flower is actually able to cross the blood-brain barrier very, very easily. So this is the kind of ideal form of this medicine to take. So, you know, it's so often the case that the natural form of something is near enough always going to be better than a synthetic or an isolated form of it. Passion flower tincture can be really potent and very fast acting, but a tea made with the dried herb is very easy to prepare, and really it's one of the more relaxing ways to consume it, you know. The ceremony of preparing the tea can be very therapeutic in itself. And it's important to remember, you know, passion flower's benefits are cumulative, so the effects are going to strengthen and stabilize over consistent use. So compliance is really very much the key factor in taking a medicine like this. Please remember, though, that herbs, or really any natural therapies for that matter, are not a substitute for healthy eating, you know, or a lifestyle that's conducive to healing or health maintenance. So natural therapies, natural medicines can be absolutely life-changing, but we have to put them in the proper context and not treat them like some sort of magic bullet that's going to single-handedly resolve all of our problems, you know. So that's it for now. Passion flower is an amazing relaxing nervine. It's very, very good for anxiety, insomnia, overthinking, all of that kind of stuff. So I'll cover more relaxing nervines in videos very soon. So please join me for that. Take it easy, and I'll see you again soon.